new work or a new call in their lives. And so that's not necessarily a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of a thing, right? And I think I heard a message recently where they said, God has got to change. He's done a lot of change in our lives, and that's part of what he does. And he's doing a changing work in the church. And churches generally don't necessarily love change, right? But change is part of life. And I think it's there's a General Eric Shinseki who said something along the lines of, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance a whole lot less. And so you guys are coming into a season where things are going to be different, right? And that's fine. One of the things that we talked about is God is not surprised by where you are as a church. Okay, I recently heard somebody talking about, God being aware of what's going on with the lilies, right? And how somebody caught it, and how we throw flowers out, but He doesn't throw out His bride. And so God is aware of what's going on. God knows what's going on in this church. God is celebrating the work that you guys have done, the incredible outreach through the history, the work that you're doing with the food pantry and in Rosemary, and the lives changed and the marriages restored and the people who have come to faith. He is celebrating that, and He's excited to see what happens next. And in the middle, sometimes it gets a little wonky, right? Sometimes as we go through seasons of change, it gets a little, scary. But God is aware, and even though His calendar and our calendar aren't always the same, He's involved and He knows what's happening, okay? And He will be walking with you through this process. And so I would just to encourage you guys as we and I just spent 3 days locked up in a room with a bunch of your team, and so now I'm invested. But as we walk through this together, I'm excited for what the future holds. You have a strong XLT. You have a great group that is guiding this. The team that I spent the last 3 days with, locked up in a room, are sharp and have a lot of horsepower and will guide you through this next season well. They're building on a strong foundation that has been built over the last 7-8 years. That's going to catapult you guys into the season ahead, right? And even though things are going to change, I think we're looking at 3 core staff members that are moving and moving on. God is aware, God is not surprised, and He's going to walk with you through this season. That was just one. Come on, I'm dying up here. Come on. So be encouraged by that. Now, the second piece of this is we, and I don't know if Rich knows I'm doing this, but I'll apologize later. But we as a church are going to need to lean in and commit to the season ahead, right? It is easy in seasons of change to slip away. You've probably seen this before. It's easy when pastors are in transition. It's easy when staff kind of turns over. It is easy to slip away and go, figure something else out. My prayer for this church is that doesn't happen. My prayer for this church is that you guys make 4 commitments in the season ahead. And everybody's rolling their eyes because it's like, I wasn't supposed to get homework. This was just supposed to be informational before I go to lunch. I would ask and I would pray that each of us in this room commit to being here. Commit over this season to being a part of this church. To commit to over the course of the beginning of the next pastor's ministry, to commit to being here. It is easy to sit at home and watch a live stream, and sometimes we need to do that with a waffle on our lap, and that's a great experience. But I would ask that you commit to being here if at all possible. I would ask that you guys commit to serving. There is a lot that goes on throughout the course of the week. There's a lot that happens in the day-to-day ministry and the day-to-day life of this church. And for that to continue on, we're all going to need to lean in and own pieces that we may not have owned in the past. And so part of the team, one of the things that the team is working on is, what is our go-forward plan as we see turnover on our staff team? Who needs to own what? Where do we need more help? You know, who needs to step in and hold babies or manage hormones with the youth? You know, what does that look like for us? And so I would ask that you commit to serve. I'd ask that you commit to being flexible. Here's the deal. We can tell some things. We know that some of what needs to happen in the season ahead, but the great theologian Mike Tyson once said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And so we can put a plan in place, but a lot of what's going to happen over this next season is kind of going to be building this plane as we fly it, because there's a lot of unknowns out there, right? But we go back and we say, God is not aware, or God is not unaware of the lilies of the field. God's not unaware of what's going on in this church. And so he is walking with us, even though it may not be necessarily what we prefer, right? Because we all have our strong preferences, and things may look a little different than what we prefer. But I would ask that you commit to being flexible in this season. Understand that the team that is stepping up to manage the day-to-day is largely volunteer. A lot of them have day jobs. Okay? And so we're going to need some flexibility. We're going to need some grace, right? We're going to need to be gentle with one another as we manage this season ahead. The last thing that I would say, and this I really didn't talk about this, but I would ask that you guys commit to continue to give. I loved what Steve was talking about in the service about what your giving is allowing you to do. The people that you are feeding, locally and internationally, the lives that you are changing. You know, yeah, there's bills and buildings and all that kind of stuff that need to be paid for, electricity and all that kind of stuff, but man, there is ministry that giving fuels. And so thank you for committing and being faithful with that through the years. And I would ask through this season that you continue to do it, even though sometimes it's easy to kind of pull back in the midst of transition. And so those are the 4 commitments that I would ask of you guys to make as you lean forward. I'm encouraged. And it's easy for me to say that because I'm just a guy with a Jeep from Orlando. But I'm encouraged by what I see in this congregation. I'm encouraged by the commitment made by the XLT and other people that gave up, 2 days of work and a Saturday to hang out with me. I'm cool and all, but not that cool. You've got a strong foundation to launch from, and I think that's going to serve you well as a church going forward. And so just to kind of give you guys a quick summary, because I mean, there's always going to be a lot of questions. As we walked through the last 3 days, there were really 4 big roles that we saw as needing to happen, okay? One of them is there needs to be a pastor search, okay? That's the no-brainer. The cool thing is our team is taking care of that for the most part. We'll manage that process for you, and if there's questions about that, we can kind of walk through that later. But the 3 big things that Rich and the rest of the team signed up for are to make sure that we are intentional about communicating what's going on, ministry-wise, but search-wise, okay? And while a plan is being developed on how to communicate that, again, grace, flexibility, kindness in this transition, a plan is being developed, and there will be more to come on that, okay? This meeting is one of the first steps of that. The intention is to communicate as much as is appropriate through the process and understand that sometimes there's just things we can't talk about publicly, and we're going to ask for grace with the XLT and with the teams that are managing this process in those situations. Does that make sense? Good. Second thing that we're looking to do is what is our short-term interim ministry plan? Okay, Easter is coming. I believe that's Steve's last Sunday, unless something's changed since yesterday. Yeah, just making sure, because We're building this as we fly it and things change, right? We're putting together what does the immediate 90 days after that period look like, okay? And we're working pretty quickly on that. So again, a little bit of grace, a little bit of flexibility on that, more to come, but you've got a solid team that's working to develop that right now. Third thing is what is our, we called it a ministry operations go forward plan, okay? This morning we heard that Ryan is going to be stepping away. And I've been here for one service, and I think we spent a day together, but thank you for the work that you have done. Thank you for... I don't know if he's an introvert or not, and he may hate what I'm about to say, but the dude needs a hug after this. Oh, did I just put my foot in my... Oh, well, that happens. That's a challenge. Track him down. There has been, you guys know this, but there has been so much work that goes on behind the scenes that he has taken care of. And so Ryan is committed to helping the teams figure out what needs to happen so that we don't drop balls. Now, part of that may mean, and we'll just ask for grace ahead of time, part of that may mean that there's some things that we need to press pause on as a church, okay? Because we're handing off a lot of the day-to-day work to a volunteer team, right? And so we may need to be gracious and understand that there may be some time, there's a season for everything, and maybe we need to press pause on some things that we find, that we personally hold dear, okay? And so we're gonna ask for patience and grace and flexibility as we go through that. But the team is working to make sure that we understand all the ministries that this church does, and it's a lot, and make sure that there's volunteers in place to be able to own different pieces of it, to make sure that we've got a framework and a plan and a process in order to make sure that people are cared for, that the church continues to function, and you guys continue to change lives outside these doors. So those are the three big things that I hit three, right? Yeah. Those are the three big things that the team is working on, and that's a lot. Okay? That's a lot. But what and I'm convinced of is that there's a strong leadership in the XLT, and the people that I spent 3 days with are infinitely capable of being able to pull this off, as long as we make those 4 commitments, lean in as a church, and oh, by the way, increase the fervor and intensity of our prayer. Okay? Because none of this happens without us being devoted as a body to pray together through this season. Does that make sense? Have I scared you yet? Oh, challenge accepted. So at the risk of opening up the floodgates, and I'll just say that the question and answer period is what is keeping you from lunch. Yeah, that was intentional. What questions do you have as far as the work that's been done so far? They're just hungry. Okay. I will be around, and Rich is always here. Uh-oh. Bill, do you have you're kind of doing the halfway up thing, so.
Yeah, well, because I know some of the answers, but will people get approached for helping, or should we just volunteer?
So. Yeah, tell them the question so they can.
Okay. Yeah, Bill asked the question, should people volunteer or will they be asked? If you recall, on January 22nd, when we had the congregational meeting, I left you with 3 things that I'd ask people to do. The first one was to pray for this transition period. The second one was to stay informed with what we're doing. And the third one was to be faithful. And in extrapolating on that a little bit, be visible. Don't fade into the background here, because we're going to come and ask you to be part of this. We talked about, a lot of things that happen in this church, and when you're losing 3 out of 4 of your staff, volunteers needs to step up, not just for this transition, but as we go into the next phase. The volunteers are going to be more and more critical. So we would ask you to, certainly, if there are things that you feel you have a gift for, and that you see that there may be a need for, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to accommodate. Okay. I don't know if that answers. Okay. Anything else?
If you're in this room and if you're watching this at home, you are being asked right now. So, and we'll be asked again. So, how's that? Yeah. So, be gracious with me. So essentially, what you're saying is, hey, we need to be. There are going to be things that are paused, and that's not necessarily a value judgment, and that's not necessarily saying that this is over forever. And kind of reiterating that there needs to be a graciousness within our team to understand that, even though these are things that are important to us, that it is appropriate because of our margin and our ability to make sure that everything happens. Sometimes we just need to press pause. Now, and I believe what you're going after is we need as a, oh my, this is going to be a 5th commitment. I'm sorry, it was his though, it wasn't mine. A fifth commitment here is to assume the best of one another. Is to assume that if something you like is changed, it's not because we all hate you. And we chuckle a little bit at that, but we also understand that we live in an anxious society, and there are industries that make a ton of money by convincing you that people are doing things because they hate you. You may have noticed some of this in the last couple of elections. So what I would encourage is to, this is why prayer is going to be so important, right? To continue to pray for the congregation, for one another, for your leadership, and for our own hearts to be able to understand that for a season, just because something is not being done doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be done forever. And that it's not nefarious. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Did I miss anything on that? Yes. And a big part of the conversation these last 3 days is how do we communicate consistently? Because as we as a team started to look and say, hey, what are the indicators out there that we need to keep an eye on? What are the things that are gonna put us at risk as a ministry? The biggies were managing expectations, making sure that we have healthy expectations on what this transition season looks like, so that we don't burn people out, so that we don't unfairly overburden volunteers, so that we don't do too much, and so that we are, able to consistently do what we're doing well, right? Another big one was communication. We understand, and the team understands that if we are not communicating across different channels and being intentional on timelines about that communication, that it is easy for us to start to create our own narrative, right? And so the team is owning that to make sure that it helps to foster continued engagement, which is another one of those risks that we identified. This church, in order to continue to function well in transition, and when a new pastor is in place, this church is going to need to maintain congregational engagement, which is why we've now given you 5 commitments. Thanks, Jeff. And so those are some of the big things that are being watched in this season to make sure that we are able to weather it well.
So as far as that engagement, piggybacking off of what Bill asked, if someone is pondering where they can plug in and where they can serve, who do they approach to ask about that?
Okay, so who do people go to? Rich raised his hand for those of you playing along at home. Rich is a great place to start, and he's up on stage. Ministry leaders.
And I have contacts all over the congregation, so don't be surprised if we come talk to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm curious how the snowbirds typically have stayed connected with the church when they're away. And of course, this year will be a much different situation in general. But for myself, last year was my first year down, and last summer was my first summer away. And even while the church was on autopilot during that time, there were things that I was like, well, should I be doing this or how should I be? I still went to the masses online. That's how I stayed connected. I didn't have another church. Excuse me for saying mass. I think I should say service. No, mass is good. That's my very short Catholic upbringing coming through. But anyway, yeah. So I'm such a newcomer to everything right now. But I assume there are other snowbirds who have been a snowbird to this church for many years. I'm curious, what have they done typically, and what do they see themselves doing differently this year because of the maybe no changes or what, but I'd say this one is definitely much different than the others.
So the question is, and I'm going to kick this to you, Rich, because I got no clue. That's confidence-inducing, I know. How do the snowbirds keep engaged when everybody runs away from the heat and humidity of the summer?
Well, I can introduce you to Karen Hodge. She will make sure you have a place to stay and you can move here full time. Now, I think that's true that, we do have seasons here in Florida as well as in the congregation. One of the things that COVID did for us that was a good thing was online capabilities and streaming capabilities. And we would certainly ask that people stay in touch and stay connected, if you will, through online services. And one of the things that we talked about during the 3 days was communications. That was a big topic. And one of the things that we're committing to is to make sure that information is shared multiple ways. not just through the website, but social media and gatherings like this, and any other way that we can think of to share that information and keep people current as to what's going on during the transition time.
A couple other just practical things. One of the pieces that the operational team is going to ask in the coming days is to just make sure that our data is good. So make sure that as you return north, do we have a good email address? Do we have a good cell phone number? Do we know where you live in case we want to mail stuff out? Those types of things are really practical, and that's going to be a push that's coming. The other piece is to pray. You can do that from wherever. And so regardless of whether you're local, regardless of whether you're in North Jersey or Wisconsin, set aside the time regularly to be praying for this body, to be praying for the next pastor, to be praying for the staff that is starting to kind of figure out what does their next season look like when they move on from this church. Pray for one another, pray for unity in the body. Pray that we are living out our now 5 commitments. I think those are some real practicals, but there will be a push to make sure that our data is clean, so that we can keep people apprised of everything. Before we wrap up, I'm gonna pray in a minute, but I do want to just kind of put a couple things out there search-wise, just so that we are level setting expectations. Here's what this typically looks like. Okay, I have been very clear, too clear with Rich and the team that typically a lead pastor search is somewhere between a 12 and an 18-month process. Okay. Now, there's a gulp there. I'm pretty good at this, but I'm still haven't figured out how to get my calendar and God's calendar to line up. And so I would ask that you guys pray that it goes quicker than that, but also have the patience and the grace through this process to ensure that, the team is able to function well. There is going to be a desire to grab people and tackle them after services starting probably next week and say, hey, when's our new pastor going to be here? If you can hold off on that for at least 2 or 3 more weeks, they'd really appreciate that. But understand that this does take a while, because as much as I would love to be able to go down to my warehouse and grab out Steve minus 15 years, I don't have one of those yet. But what we will be doing is making sure that whoever we bring to you guys is a match for you theologically, understands your unique organizational culture, understands the culture of this area, that their personality is going to be a decent fit with you guys, because God's fearfully and wonderfully made us, but He's given some of us quirks. Faces are coming to mind. But we want to make sure that those quirks are going to work well here, okay? We want to make sure that they've got the skill set to be able to do this, and we want to make sure that there's a genuine sense of chemistry between that pastor and this body, so that they can spend 5 years here, and you actually want them to stay that whole 5 years. The question we ask a lot of times around the chemistry piece is, when you drive up into the parking lot and you see their car, does it take an extra minute before you get out and come into the office? There's some faces coming to mind, right? And so part of what we're looking to do is make sure that we find that person that's going to have genuine chemistry here, that you want to be by your bedside when you're in the hospital, that you are excited to have over on a random Tuesday night for barbecue, right? And so we're at work making sure that we find people that fit those 5 areas for you guys. Pray for us. Pray for your team. God is not surprised by any of this. And what's always been amazing to me is the work that God does in the in-between. Okay? The work that God does in a body as he transitions you from being a church that was led by the founding pastor that started this 8 years ago into the next season of ministry to build on that foundation. I can't wait to see what that looks like, 3, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So.
And you're making sure they're not just fleeing the cold, but
Oh, dude, this is recorded. I'm going to get myself in trouble. So when we do like Florida searches or Hilton Head Island's another one, we have to weed out the golfers. Because, there's a lot of people that really love the idea of being able to golf. Or when we do searches in Orlando, being able to have a Disney pass. And so a lot of what we have to do is just kind of say, hey, look, if Disney wasn't there, would you still move there? Or, it gets humid and there's hurricanes, right? And so, oh yeah, we're keeping an eye on that. So, cool. Any other questions? If not, I'll pray and we can go to lunch. Cool. Father, it is good to be here today. Father, I thank you for my new friends. I thank you for their willingness to lean into their community and to care well. Father, I thank you for the efforts to feed not just people in this community, but across the world. Father, I thank you for willingness to go into communities and serve those that just need your love. Father, I thank you for a 7-year history of changing lives. I thank you for all that you have done through this place, whether it was in a middle school or a high school, whether it was online or in this current building. I thank you for that. Father, I'm grateful for the lives and for the souls that are in heaven now because of what is going on here. And Father, I am so grateful that you are not done yet. Father, I'm grateful that you have more work for this church to do. And I'm grateful that you are walking through this transition process with them. Father, I pray for my new friends that they will have grace with one another. I pray that they will be willing to lean into the hard work and not create our own narratives, but to be flexible and to assume the best of one another. Father, I pray for their 5 commitments to being here, Lord. Committing to serve in some of the various ministries that are going on here. Father, I pray for their commitment to being flexible as things change. And even though the change is going to happen, that there is a willingness to admit that you are constant. And that's all we need. Father, I pray for the commitment to continue to give financially to this body, to sustain the ministry that's been going on, to sustain the ministry that is going to happen, Lord, and to ensure that this great work can continue. Father, and I pray for the commitment to being gracious and assume the best of one another in this season to come. Lord, you are not done here. Father, you have great things that you are still going to do in the future, Lord. And we don't know what that is, but we're excited to see it. And so, Father, as a body, I pray that you will walk with them, that you will walk before them, walk behind them, that you'll be to their left and to their right, that you will guide, you will protect, and you'll give them the wisdom and the courage that they need to lead into this next season. And Father, through it all, give us hope, give us endurance, and give us peace. Father, you're doing great things here, and you're going to continue to do them. And so, Father, I commit this body to you. I commit this body to your work. And I thank you for what you've been up to. And so, Father, in the name of Jesus, your Son, we ask that you make this so. Amen. Amen. Thank you, guys.